But this morning I want to talk about all about the blessings. I mean, right? We're always eager to find in the Word of God when it says we're going to be blessed, right? We're always like, that's what I want. I want to hear an increase in my paycheck. I want to hear, about all these blessings, these physical blessings, whatever blessings you can give me. That's what I want. And we're all so keen on that, right? So, Deuteronomy chapter 28 is something that we've all heard of at some point or another, but I wanted to point out something about this passage. So let's start reading. I'm reading from the New King James Version. And it says, in verse 1, it says, "Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God." Now, did y'all hear anything necessary? There was a if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God. If. That's kind of like when you say, I will reward you, but, right? It's one of those things that he has placed a requirement on it. So if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments, which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you. That's what I want to hear. Not only that there's blessings, but there's blessings that are going to overtake me. In other words, like, I try to think of it at times. When I was a kid, I used to watch Scrooge McDuck, okay? And he was a character on TV that had, like, loads of money. And he would literally have so much he would swim in it. I want to be so overwhelmed with blessings that I have to, like, swim to get up out of it. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of blessings I want. But if we notice, it says, after that, it says, because you obeyed the voice of the Lord our God. Right? So the blessings were dependent upon something. And then if you go on here, and I'm not going to read all these verses, but I'm going to synopsis it, okay? It says, blessed the city, the country, blessed produce and herds, blessed basket and bowl, blessed when you come in and you go out. We've heard that one, haven't we? Enemies, you're going to be defeated. Blessings on your storehouse, work, and land. Establish you as a royal, holy people to himself. Others will fear you. Lands and livestock will increase. Rain and blessings on your work. Lend and not borrow. Head and not tail. Above and never beneath. Now that's something to shout about. Glory. Right? And so many times I have heard this passage preached again and again and again, and I'm like, woohoo! Gives you chill bumps. But the interesting thing is I've never really placed together the first part and the second part and looked at how well they coincide. So the second part, so verse 1 through 14 is talking about blessing. Verse 15, on the other hand, falls on something else. So it says if we obey God, it brings blessings. However, if we fail to obey, there's some curses. Okay? So it says, verse 15 says, but it shall come to pass if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God. Now remember earlier in verse 1 it said if you diligently obey God, you're going to get blessings. Now it says if you don't obey the Lord your God. Wow. And observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. So, careful. You know what I'm saying? Because these things become dependent upon how well you are connected to God. Are you listening to God? And so many times I looked at this because if you read on this, these verses basically bounce back at each other, okay? So in the blessings, it's up. In the cursings, it's down. But what's interesting is you're cursed in the city and the country. We were blessed in the city and the country, right? Cursed produce and herds. Same thing. Cursed basket and bowl. Cursed when you come in, cursed when you go out. Defeated by your enemies. Cursing, confusion, and rebuke until you are destroyed and perish quickly. You shall become curse words among other nations. Instead of a holy people, they're going to speak. It's going to be like a bad word. It says, livestock slaughtered or taken, your crops destroyed and devoured. Change the rain to powder and dust until it's destroyed. Borrow and not lend. Tell talking about bringing back plagues and all these kind of things that are going to infest you. And the thing that God pointed out to me is it says, why are things not occurring the way we think they should in our own lives and in our nation and in our state and in our city? Why are things not going exactly the way we should? And a lot of people point the finger at God. And a lot of the times, not the nice finger. Why? Because they're questioning God. God, why did you allow all these curses to come upon us? I didn't do anything to deserve this. Why? I've always served you. I've been in church. I've been in your word. Why? But the thing is, we have to understand here is it's not a question of why God allowed it. It's a question of why were we so disobedient? And the thing we have to understand here is something that God pointed out to me in my own life is not, obedience does not mean veering from things that you know to be wrong, but obedience is going above and around, above and beyond that. Does that make sense? Like obedience doesn't mean not killing somebody so God will love me, right? But obedience means going and maybe feeding the homeless or going out and doing an extra chore when I'm not expected to. You see what I'm saying? Because why? Because we have to understand that God's grace, when we follow after Him, He reaches down and pulls us up to a level of blessing. Okay? And if we are disobedient, He goes, okay, you're going to have to deal with it. And what happens? He releases us because we want to be let go, and we fall right back into the curses. Because the curses weren't removed, we were moved away from them. Grace redeemed us, brought us out, right? We've heard that in Scripture. And the funny thing is then when we say, hey, I got this under control, He goes, okay. Bad idea, but okay. It's interesting, isn't it? And so it's no longer a question of why is God doing something, but what inside of me is not doing what I need to do for God to be able to bless me. Wow. And that caused some deep questions inside of me because I was like, God, I don't know how many times I stepped out on a limb for you, you know what I'm saying? And all these different things, and I've been going, I've been doing, come on, And it's just like, it's not about just doing right versus wrong. There's something more to this, right? And so one of the things I thought was very important is in Genesis 22, and this is actually bouncing back a little bit on something we've already discussed a little bit, but I wanted to look at this. So we know that God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his only son, right? This was like his flesh and blood, his only kid that was between him and Sarah. God's appointed, right? We're going to prosper you through this kid, and now I want you to sacrifice him. Wow, what a testing. What a moment in time. And so it's interesting that Abraham, because Abraham before that, you'll have to understand, was always faithful, right? He was God-fearing. He was after God's heart. He was constantly following. So we're not talking about somebody who wasn't doing the right thing. We're talking about somebody who said, I will go in faith even if it contradicts the way I think it should happen.
The way God.
Yeah. Obedience despite everything. And so what's interesting here is he takes him up, he walks him, he has all the sacrificial stuff, he sets the altar up, lays his son down, ties him, binds him, gets ready, pulls up the knife. I mean, he's going to do it. And of course, God stops him because we know that's not where the story ends, right? But it goes on. And so here's what's interesting. Once all this has occurred and God stopped him and everything, the angel of the Lord, okay, in verse 15 says, he called out to Abraham a second time out of heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your one only son. blessings I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants. So we're not talking about a temporary thing for just him and his family. We're talking about through the ages, test of time, biblical lineage, right? That we are a part of. And it says, descendants as the stars of the heaven and the sands of the seashore, and your descendants shall possess the gates of their enemy. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. It's interesting because we look at the story and we see how huge a sacrifice was made, right? How much obedience was showed beyond everything. I mean, I can't even imagine trying to do something like that. I mean, if God told me to do that, I would have to like, okay, God, I need this in writing. You know, I need you to come down and like physically talk to me. You know what I'm saying? It would be one of those things where it'd be hard. But here's what's interesting. The big obedience, step of obedience that was causing him to go out of something he could never imagine caused a huge blessing. Right? I mean, that was heavy devotion, and guess what? It not only blessed him, but it blessed everybody who came after him. Have y'all ever heard somebody say, I'm going to hit you so hard your grandchildren are going to get knocked out or something?
I want to hit him so hard. Sometimes I've told him I'm going to slap you in the next week.
Yeah. And so you think about these kind of things and you're like, I'm not even going to affect you now. I'm going to affect you a long time from now. You mess with me, you know. You tick me off, you know. But it's interesting. God said, guess what? You've done so much towards me. You've been so obedient that I'm not only going to bless you, I'm going to bless you so much it's just going to go through the eons of time. And so it's powerful. It's amazing the way that this happens in the story. And so what I wanted to look at is I wanted to look at us and say, you know what? Blessings, cursings, I don't know about y'all, but I want blessings. Well, the thing that's interesting is Matthew chapter 25. We've heard this story probably 1,000 times, right? The story of the talents. He gives one 5, he gives one 2, he gives one 1. Right? But what I want us to do is as we read through this story, I want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to input instead of talent, I'm going to say provisions. What?
Provisions. No, I didn't say that.
Oh, I thought you were wondering something. Okay. So yeah, Matthew chapter 25. Okay? So let's read this. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far-off country who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 provisions, another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received 5 provisions went and traded them, made another 5. Likewise, the one who received 2 gained 2 more. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of the servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 provisions came and brought another 5, and said, Lord, you have delivered to me 5 provisions. Look, I have gained 5 more provisions besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you rule over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. He does the same thing with the guy with 2, right? So we can kind of skip ahead a little bit. He does the same thing with guy number 2. He says, he's received 2 provisions. He gained 2 provisions here. And God said, well done. But it's interesting because the last one said, I went and buried it in the ground, right? Because I knew that you gather where you don't sow. And so I know that you had to have it. And I was afraid, so I went and hid it in the ground. And this is what I have for you. So basically just returning the same thing that was given. And in verse 26 it says, but his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my provision with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back mine own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has, or take the provision from him and give it to the one who has 10 provisions. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So, I love the fact that Jesus, in all that he is and all that he does, brought an Old Testament law-bound blessing and cursings into the New Testament grace period, right? And said, you're still expected to listen to God. Right? It's not something that he's done in the past, it's about a current thing that he's doing. It's not about certain commands to follow. Because you have to understand that in the Old Testament, they had laws governing everything that they did, right? I mean, literally, you went and did this, you had to have this way, this time, you had to be dressed this way, right? And there were all these constructions, all these laws. But now God's grace has redeemed us, but not redeemed us to stop following after what God's commanded. But just the fact that, guess what? It's no longer outlined for us. Why? Because we should want to do it. If our heart's after God, we should want to do it. It shouldn't be a requirement that's saying, I don't know what to do, I got to read the book. Right? You see what I'm saying? And so it should be about growing what he has provided. It wasn't about the talents. It was about what had been given to them. Has God given you anything? Well, yes. He's given me finances. I couldn't have made any money that I've made any time without God. So all the finances he gave to me. So if he's given me finances, am I trying to increase those finances to benefit his kingdom? I've been really thinking this out. God's just been blowing me away with this stuff, right? If he has given me the ability to speak, I need to be speaking. If he's given me the ability to work, I need to be working. You see what I'm getting at? I'm saying the things that God has provided you, we need to act upon them. Because if I have been given something and I sit there and hold it and put it in my pocket, it's never going to do anything. But if I take that thing that he's given me and use it, it's going to increase. Does that make sense? It's going to increase. And is it going to increase because of us? No, it's going to increase because of him. Because he caused things to increase that shouldn't have increased. I don't know about y'all, but I have never once in my life taken a fish and made it feed 5,000 people.
Or one loaf of bread.
Or a little bread. You see what I'm saying? This stuff it's just not even like in our spectrum of understanding or thinking. But God caused these things to just blow it out of the water, right? Multiply. And in fact, what did it say? Oh no, it said it, right? Genesis 22 says, blessings I will bless you, and multiply I will multiply your descendants. If we act and follow after God's heart, he's gonna bless us. If we have the knowledge of things and God has provided us, and we are saved, and don't do anything with that, what he's given us, yikes. You see what I'm saying? Because when we walk with him, he redeems us. You understand? And that's why it talks about a sanctification. It's a daily thing. That he is redeeming us from the troubles. He is redeeming us from the problems that maybe sometimes we've even created. You understand? And so he's been that redemptive piece to us. And so it's not all about not doing bad. I know a billion people out there who have never stepped into a church in their life, and they are some of the cleanest people. You won't find anything wrong with their moral compass or anything. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And you probably know some of those people, right? That they have an awesome moral compass, but that doesn't remove us from the curse. Not doing bad has nothing to do with being cursed. We're cursed because of who we are. Right? We were born into this. We don't have any other choice. This is us. And And so the only way to get out of this curse is to be with God. I think there's a disconnect sometimes. And I'm speaking to myself. There's a disconnect because I think that, well, I came to you, God, I've got it figured out. I'm doing, what you told me to do. But am I really following God all out? Or am I too holding something back? He spoke to me big time. He said, Jason, he goes, you need to make sure because I can't bless you unless you're following me and being truly obedient to me. Wow. And that's hard, right? That's hard because it's like, God, if I did everything you'd say, people think I was insane, right? Or how would that work? Or what would that accomplish, right? And so I question things because while I might be able to handle it, I wouldn't want to put my family through extra stuff. Or I would, you know what I'm saying? And so I try to start thinking it out where I should just be saying, God, you want me to walk this road? I'll walk this road. I don't care how long it takes to get to the end of it. I'm going to walk this road. You understand what I'm saying? Obey Jesus and do like he did. Right? So many people thought he came to this earth only to die on the cross. No. He came so that he could be born and he could show us the way to walk through our existence. Right? He was a living testimony for us. In fact, Paul said it the best. He goes, I follow Christ's examples, follow me. You can follow my example because I'm following Christ. So as I follow Christ, you can follow me. If I stop following Christ, you need to follow Christ. You need to follow his example. What does that mean? He had to lead us. Right? And so he led us while here on earth. Just, what would Jesus do? I mean, I know it's redundant, but seriously. What would Jesus be doing at this point? And that is the way you begin to change curses into blessings. Because curses is where we're at. Blessings is where we strive to be. And while, yes, God can redeem you from the gates of hell if you ask him into your heart. But if you truly want all that God has for you, you got to be following after him with everything that you are, right? If you want everything, you got to give him everything. That means sometimes our pride, our emotions, our finances, it's that thing. I'm telling you, it was the hardest thing to let my daughter go to Messenger College. But she believed that she wanted to go into ministry, and that's where she wanted to be, and I was like, I can't stop you from doing that, no matter how hard it hurts, for her to be that far away. And so, it's interesting that we get these kind of perspectives in our minds, but I want us to think about two things, okay, real quick. So bringing us back, I want us to look at the fact that cursings is where we are at, blessings is where we want to be, okay? So when God picks us up because we are connected to him, right, and we're being obedient to his word, he's got us in his hands, right? If we're not being obedient, guess what we did? We stepped out of his coverage. I mean, right? That's what we've done. If I had an umbrella that was big enough to fit my whole family, if somebody stepped outside the umbrella, they're going to get wet. Or hit with the light beamer. I was trying to think of the hell. Yeah, I was trying to think of something, the little ice balls, they hurt you. And so that's what we got to think about. And then the second thing we have to understand is obedience is what God has provided you to do something with it. Right? He's provided you to do something with it. So God, speak to each and every single one of us, right? That we can find the places where we need to be truly obedient to him and need to say that, God, the things that you have provided, now, what can I be doing with it? Right? What can I be accomplishing with what you've given me? You've given me a car. Can I get someone to ride to church?